My twin sister Janessa was murdered at the age of 16. I witnessed it like a coward from atop a tree in the forest where it happened. I actually blacked out the memory for a while. I knew she was dead, but I couldn't remember how it happened. It wasn't until I tried therapy that it slowly came back to me. I was also reminded how much my parents used to fight. Our family was planning a camping trip the day before my sister's death. Before leaving, my parents erupted into a massive fight. Janessa and I were looking forward to the trip, and once again our parents' awful communication skills ruined everything before it even happened. We snuck out the house and took a lift to the forest. We left our phones at home, not caring whether our parents would be worried sick. We enjoyed ourselves the first day, and I set up our tent, made a fire, had s'mores, and did all the stuff typically associated with camping. The next morning everything changed. I woke up alone in our tent. Outside I hear my sister talking to someone. Inquisitive, I opened the tent and saw someone sitting at our now out campfire who looked just like me. The figure transformed as soon as Janessa realized it wasn't me. Together we ran off. The thing was rushing after us with heavy footsteps. I was faster than my sister and a bit more athletic. I grabbed onto a tree branch and climbed up the tree. Janessa was not so lucky. I watched it happen. I watched that thing tear my sister to pieces. I'm still haunted by her screams. I also understand now why she always appears badly mutilated in my nightmares. I stayed up in that tree overnight, my sister's corpse laying in the leaves. Her remaining eye was staring up at me. While in therapy, there was a moment when I suddenly recalled the hallucination I had the morning of my sister's death. I thought I saw her corpse clawing at the tree where I hid. She wanted me to come down and join her. It caused me to panic and cry out. A couple of men who had been camping in my area heard my screams, and at last I was rescued. My parents don't argue anymore. I hardly see them at all anymore since my sister's death. Over the last couple years, my parents have frequently gone on vacations. They don't tell me where, and I never ask. I usually wake up and find out that they left yet again. I'm out of high school now, and have no career path. I've only really had one thing on my mind since I remembered what killed Janessa. Now I'm returning to that forest where she died, and I'm going after that thing that killed her. I've been preparing for this, and if it's a Wendigo, like I've suspected, then I'm more than ready to take my revenge. This is how I'm doing it. I took a lift again. Had the driver known what I was carrying in my bags, I doubt he would have let me in. As I sat there, the realization of what I was doing grew heavy on me. What the hell am I doing? I've been talking myself up to do this for the last couple years. As much as I wanted a glorious victory, the closer I've come to this day, the more I've started to daydream about dying the same way that Janessa did. As angry as I am with my parents, I don't think they deserve to lose their only remaining child. But I just can't move on knowing that the thing's still out there. My legs were as dense as gold once I tried to exit the cab. The driver watched me awkwardly as I struggled to pull myself out, while putting my backpack on and working to carry the other supplies. Why was I doing this alone? I guess I didn't want anyone else to get hurt in this, but God, I wish I wasn't out here doing this alone. With each step I took into the forest, the more the terror numbed. I was in the domain of the Wendigo now. I wasn't entirely sure how much of the information about them was real. I knew that they could change their appearance. I know that their true form is just like the drawings people have made. There's no way to be an expert on these things unless you actually dealt with one. I'm still not sure why it decided not to come after me. Based on its size, I doubt it would have had any difficulty. Instead, I'm still alive, and crazy enough to come back to pick a fight. As I set up camp, I found myself jumping at the sound of any bird call or movement by any nearby animal. The way I hammered in my tent, I knew I was calling attention to myself. In my left pocket was a gun. Like werewolves, I heard that silver bullets were necessary to kill Wendigos, but what if I was wrong? The thought had been with me ever since I stepped foot back into these woods. I stopped frequently while setting up. Behind a nearby tree, I was almost certain I could see someone watching me, then hiding behind it. I didn't bother to walk over or check it out. I finished up the tent and made up my sleeping bag inside. As I did this, I heard calls that sounded almost human off in the distance. It probably knew I was here. The minutes went by slowly, but soon dusk set upon the forest. I built a fire, like the one Janessa and I had made. I roasted 2 marshmallows. Despite her absence, I made a s'more for her as well, resting it on the sizable rock near the fire. As I ate it, I thought about our last night together. All things considered, it was pleasant. Being twins, we had our moments where we had gotten into arguments like our parents. We'd fought one another. We had our problems. But that night had been pleasant. I'd actually been glad that we decided to camp without our parents. As frightened as I still was, I felt the warmth, not from the fire. A sense of calm came over me, as my memories were suddenly flooded with the good times Janessa and I had. The good times were not for long. I could hear footsteps not far behind me. Jeremy. I could never forget that voice. It sounded like Janessa, but I knew it wasn't her. For some reason I felt compelled to sit there calmly. As it approached, I could tell it was going to take a seat at the rock where I left the s'more. I glanced delicately to my right. I watched as a figure that looked almost identical to the Janessa I remember pick up the s'more and take a bite. That's not yours, I surprised myself by blurting out. The fake Janessa ignored me, continuing to scarf it down. My terror turned to anger. The thing responsible for my sister's death is sitting right next to me, mocking my grief. I didn't wait for it to finish. I pulled up my gun and pointed it directly at the figure. Before I could fire, the creature jumped to the left and turned around. I was stuck with paralysis when I saw the mutilated face of my sister's corpse staring back at me. I'm trapped, Jeremy. I struggled to keep aim. How dare this thing pretend to be her? It won't let me go, and it won't let you go either. We can be together again. It's much nicer than going home to an empty house and unliving parents. She held her hand out to me. Trust me, brother. Please. My trigger finger felt as though struck with a serious case of arthritis. Janessa took a step towards me. Wait, no. It's not Janessa. Why did I suddenly forget that? Feed the forest with me, Jeremy. It's so much better than being dead. Prove it. At last I pulled the trigger. The creature hollered in pain as it fell to the ground. I hit a lung, which wouldn't be enough. I aimed the gun at the heart, but failed to pull the trigger again as it rolled over and jumped back to its feet. Within seconds, it transformed from a corpse of my sister to its massive dark skeletal form with massive antlers. My mind was caught between fight and flight. I stood there aiming my gun, but desperately wanting to flee. As it rushed towards me, I chose the latter option. I rushed over to the bag I left near my tent. Inside was a weapon that I built myself. As I rushed over, I could tell I wasn't going to outrun it. I fired another shot. The bullet lodged itself into the neck of the beast. It cried out once more, buying me a bit of time to get to the bag. Why didn't I have it unzipped? As I tried to open it, the Wendigo rushed towards me again. Just like the day of Janessa's death, I ran from the campsite, further into the forest, history repeating itself. I wasn't going to fail to avenge my sister. My parents weren't going to lose their last remaining child, all because I couldn't let it go. After at least several minutes, I somehow managed to keep outrunning it. I refused to slow down and look behind my shoulder. As I kept running, I noticed that I had gone in some sort of circle. Up ahead of me was the campsite. I had a chance to grab the bag and pull out the weapon. The closer I came to the campsite, the louder the Wendigo's footsteps became, and I could almost feel the wind as the creature tried to claw me. Once I reached the campsite, I put out my hand, clutching the bag. It felt like almost too great a risk to put the gun back in my pocket, but I needed it free to pull out the weapon. I managed to do this just with my left hand, pulling out the long metal spike. I built it in such a way that the spike would shoot out at a push of a button. The Wendigo wasn't going to slow down until it had me. I had no choice. I had to turn around. I would have to have perfect timing. I had to collect my debt from the creature that took my twin sister. Chew on this, you son of a bitch. I turned around, pressing the button that shot the spike out. Less than a foot from my face was the Wendigo. Its cry so loud it hurt my ears, and they began to ring. I had done it. The spike pierced the heart. Weakly, the Wendigo tried to swipe at me, but somehow lacked the strength. The next part was a gamble. I pulled up my gun and shot it in the head. It wasn't going to be enough to end the Wendigo, assuming what I read was correct. I rushed over to where I dropped the bag. Inside was a silver axe I had also designed myself. When I returned, the creature was still conscious, letting out agonizing cries. I felt no sympathy. I hacked off its wrist first. Its claws were the biggest threat, and I wanted them gone. Despite the weightlifting I've been doing, it took over a dozen hacks to remove the first long-fingered hand. I pulled out my gun and shot it in the head again. It subdued the creature long enough for me to remove the second hand, and then I began on its head. As I began walking up, I again found myself screaming at the creature. I demanded it stay dead, calling it every insulting name that came to mind. Once I had hacked most of my way through its head, I pulled it off. I kicked it a couple feet away. The Wendigo no longer moved. It took about an hour, but I managed to put each limb, the head, and the torso in trash bags that I had brought along. One by one I carried them back to the campsite. I lit another fire, burning each bag. It took until dawn for me to burn the entire body. I left the torso for last. It was a struggle, but I managed to remove the heart, ripped it to pieces, and placed it in a silver box. After locking it, I looked around the site and decided to leave everything except my gun and box behind. I was never particularly religious, but in the months leading up to my fight, I'd gotten to know a priest in a church in my area. Luckily for me, he was there when I arrived with the silver box. His face was several shades paler when I showed it to him. Nevertheless, he escorted me to the back of the church with a pair of shovels and helped me bury it. Once done, I sat there, suddenly flooded with overwhelming emotions. I'd done it. My sister's killer was dead. Its body was burned, its heart in pieces and buried. Janessa, I cried out. I kept my promise. I killed it. The Wendigo can't hurt anyone else. It won't kill anyone else. I placed my lowered head into my hands and continued to cry. I'm sorry I wasn't braver before. I placed some flowers at my sister's grave an hour later. I talked to her tombstone as though she was listening. I like to believe that she was, and that she was pleased with my accomplishment. Afterwards, I returned home and slept through the day and the night. Once the morning came, I heard some noises downstairs. I went down to see my parents were home, sitting down for breakfast. They stopped and looked over at me, saying nothing. I walked over and pulled up a seat. I had no appetite at all. How was your trip? Where did you guys go? My parents exchanged looks before my father replied. We went to go visit your aunt and uncle. Did you enjoy it? I had difficulty keeping my chin from quivering as I lowered my head again. Jeremy, sweetie, what's wrong? Both my mother and father got up and came over to me. Why do you keep leaving me alone? God damn it, I'm your only kid left. Do you not give a shit about me? They hugged me tightly, offering apologies. I could have sworn I felt another pair of hands on my shoulders. The light touch was the most comforting of all. I really hope Janessa is proud of me, but a new task was ahead of me now. A harder task, perhaps. I was going to have to figure out how to reconcile with my parents. Our family had been broken long before her death, but I know with some effort, things could be better than this. I hope she continues to give me the strength to put myself together as I progress into adulthood